Ladies and gentlemen, well done on your endurance, your resilience, your persistence, and your determination to remain with us for the whole day. And it doesn't need to be mentioned that all of the issues being discussed today in the midst of what we call the fourth industrial revolution are urgent and critical, nothing less than a global youth unemployment crisis. We're coming to the last session on a day in which we've been discussing the broadest issue of shaping a skills strategy for a globalized world. And please remember, this is our guiding document, the Youth Declaration that we saw, we heard, we watched as the day began. Take it with you tonight before you shut off your bedside light. Read it. I know you're all educated, you're all really good at school, and you can memorize all of the 18 principles. I'm going to test you on them tomorrow. And I won't tell you what the prize is. We've got a very good, a very detailed three-part series coming up, which is going to look at the broad issue of skills and careers without borders, which is going to address right on the issue of this globalized world, the identification of the changing skills demand. So picking up on the very last session, which I thought was very, very good by the ILO, breaking down this idea of a skills mismatch. This session is going to be brought to you by the European Commission, working in cooperation with CEDEFOP and also the European Training Foundation. They will hold separate sessions tomorrow. And as if we needed a reminder how important skills are in being adaptable, Michel Servoz is stepping in at the last minute, drawing in on other of his skills to be your moderator for this session. So please, ladies and gentlemen, please give him the support and the attention that he needs. Of course, you met him this morning. He's the Director General at the European Commission for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, and he's looking ahead to next month's Skills Week, focusing on vocational training across Europe. So please join me in welcoming Michel Servoz, who's going to guide you through the next session.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us in this session. I'd like to say a few words just to introduce the topic, and then my fellow panelists will join me. Where I wanted to start is basically to say something fairly simple about competitiveness. All economies in the world are trying to be the most competitive. I think this is very much an issue also in the European Union. And if I have to summarize it to one thing, competitiveness is about skills. Skills actually define our competitiveness. And this is really important in the present context, where you can see a big change of the economy and the world of work. It's a bit like a seism, a move of the tectonic plates. And I'd like to say, and this has been said already this morning, I'd like to say that I see three elements which are really the driving forces of these changes. And all these elements, these tectonic plates, they affect skills. One of them is globalization. Globalization 10 years ago was not a fact of life. It has become a fact of life. And I must say at the same time, it changed a lot. 10 years ago, when one spoke about globalization, it was about big large industrial conglomerates moving their manufacturing plants to other countries to diminish labor costs. Now, it's all about services, and you actually see a lot of very small players on the internet exchanging data and services. And this is very much about skills, where the best skills are. The second element, the second driving force, is digitalization. Companies basically can locate their production, their design, the intelligence of their products, where they find the best skills. The third element is robotization. Now what is happening, if I can summarize it very crudely, is all the standard tasks are going to robots, and humans are keeping the most complex tasks. So this is what is happening with the economy. and it has a huge impact on the way work is organized, but also on skills. You can see the impact on the labor market. For example, if I take the IT sector in the European Union, between 2013 and 2015, more than 1 million jobs were created in this sector. And the forecast we have is really problematic because the forecast shows that by 2020, we will be missing 1 million people in this sector. So we have a lack of skills. And looking, by the way, at the estimates more closely, the problem is basically where you have the biggest shortage is also in countries where you have high unemployment. So there is something that is not working. The link between the education system and the labor market is not properly made. You have also a lot of business innovation. All these new services which have been created, like Amazon, like Uber, all of this is creating a lot of jobs, marketing, in the marketing sector, creative designers, etc., etc. Do we have today the skills to respond to these needs? I think it's not always the case. I should also say that even in traditional industries, you have a huge change. For example, 10 years ago, essentially, the manufacturing sector was diminishing its presence in the European Union. Now you can see that, for example, new jobs are created again in the car manufacturing sector in Europe. The shoe manufacturing sector almost disappeared completely in Europe a few years back. Now again, some jobs are created in this sector in Europe. Of course, you will tell me, these are not the same jobs. And indeed, there was a big change. Actually, a lot of low-skills jobs disappeared and are replaced now by high-skills jobs. So the question is, how do you manage the transition? This morning, somebody said that in 10, 15 years' time, all truck drivers will be replaced by artificial intelligence. The question is basically, what are we going to do with these truck drivers? Can we imagine that they are going to become creative designers, IT engineers? Clearly, the answer cannot be a full yes. But the question is basically, what kind of transition can we organize for them? So for me, these are the tectonic plates, and they are moving. And the question is basically, how do we adapt to these new situations? I think also the point is very much that the way we provide skills, the way we acquire skills is changing a lot. For my parents, to have a job for your life was something which was natural. In my generation, essentially we started to have 4, 5, 6 jobs in one career. For my children, this was said this morning, and I think it's quite important, the issue is very much to have different careers in your lifetime, to have 4 to 5 jobs at the same time. So we can see this evolution, and it is actually affecting very much skills, because skills now is about learning to learn. You know that your skills are not going to be up to date in 5 to 10 years. You know that you will have to acquire new skills. So the question is, how can you adapt yourself? How can you acquire these new skills? And I want to say also, as a European, that one of the big issues is to be able to capture the diversity of different languages, different culture. This is an issue, a challenge for the European Union, but I think for our children, this is extremely important. The capacity to learn another culture, another way to do business, another language, these are absolutely essential for the future. So this is what I wanted to say by way of introduction, and I'd like to say that I'm really delighted to participate in this WorldSkills Conference. I was very impressed going around the exhibition to see the different competitions, because I think this is really what this is about. Skills is essential for the future, but we have to get practical about it. And this kind of competition is a way also to show that by being concrete, by being practical, we can achieve something. So this session today is organized by the European Commission together with our 2 partner agencies, CEDEFOP, the European Center for the Development of Vocational Education and Training in Thessaloniki in Greece, and the European Training Foundation, ETF, in Torino, Italy. So in this first session this afternoon, we will focus on global trends and their impact on skills. In the second round, we will focus on what kind of skills and competencies are necessary to have an international career. And then thirdly, we will come back to an issue which was discussed this morning, which is how can we make more attractive vocational education and training. Tomorrow, the session that will be shared by Cesare Onestini, the director of ETF, will be about how we can ensure coordination, cooperation, and governance approaches in the area of skills. And the final session, shared by the director of CEDEFOP, James Calleja, will be about how to promote skills and careers without border. So I'm looking forward to our discussion. I'm going to move to my place here and to introduce our panelists. Thank you. So I'd like to be joined, first of all, by Joyce Bale. She's the managing director of ADECO Middle East, and you have worked in different countries, including not only the Netherlands, where you come from, but also China, Hong Kong, and the United Arab Emirates. Please, a round of applause for Joyce. The second speaker will be Margareta Segard. She is from Portugal, and she is the vice president of EVBB, where you follow in particular all issues concerning EQF, ECVET, and ECAVET, all issues related to vocational education and training. And you are also a deputy director for training and human capital in ISQ. A round of applause, please, for Margareta. Next, we have Peter Thiel, who is the Deputy Director in the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. He is a very well-known expert in vocational education and training. He worked for the ILO in Geneva and in Torino, and he has been very active in the field of that. He's also a board member of CEDEFOP in particular. Thank you, Peter, for joining us. Our next speaker, Martha Schulz, has been replaced by Monika Elsik. And Monika, you are from Austria, and you are the Deputy Director General of the Austrian Institute for Economic and for the Promotion of the Austrian Chamber of Commerce. Please welcome Monika. Then we have with us Barthélemy Deutsch, who is from Belgium. The briefing I have says that after watching your mother and your grandmother cooking, you decided to get involved in the basics of cooking, which is great. My mother also tried this on me. When she saw me in action, she decided I could not make a career in this, and this is why I ended as a lawyer. I'm sorry for saying this.
Fine. My father is a lawyer, so it's
okay. I should also say that you are a champion, actually, and so you will talk about, I hope, this competition and what it means to be a champion. Finally, we have Mateusz Frądrzejewski, and you are a member of the European Apprentices Network since a few years. And I should say also you have done a mobility program for apprenticeship abroad, which is something the European Commission would like to promote. And you are also the president of the European Confederation of Independent Trade Unions Youth, representing more than 42 organizations in 28 countries. Thank you for being with us today. So let me go into the first round of our discussion, and I will ask a question to our speakers, and then I would like to ask also some remarks and questions from the audience. So I'd like to start with you, Peter, if you agree. And my question to you is how do you see global trends affecting skills, how they affect technology, what I mentioned in my introduction, digitalization has also a big impact. also social divisions as a big impact. So how can we actually reflect these global trends in national approaches to anticipate skills needs and labor market development?
That's a long question, and I only have 1 minute, I suppose. So I would confirm what you said in your introductory remarks, that on the one hand, we have to see that capital, talent, knowledge is flowing around the world. Digitalization is making economy and international cooperation quicker. The changing global value chain is a challenge for us. And you mentioned several other challenges that we have to face. I think one is still missing, that is in particular a challenge for Germany. This is migration. When we talk about international qualifications, international skills, we also have to take into account that we get more and more people into our countries. In Germany, in the last 2 years, just 1.4 million refugees. And they come with qualifications, they come with skills, and how to recognize them, how to validate them. This is also challenging us now in our system. Talking about Germany, I also have to say that we don't have anything as value except heads and brains. We have no raw materials. We are highly export-oriented and dependent. We are in the heart of Europe with 9 neighbor countries, so we are highly also dependent on international cooperation. And that is why our strategies in the field of VET and education to strengthen international cooperation, to strengthen mobility rates. We can come to that point maybe later during the discussion, how we plan and do that, to work also on the internationalization of qualifications, but on the other hand, also to work on assets and standalone products in our country, for example, via the combination of research and education, in order to be and keep competitiveness in the world market.
Thank you very much, Peter. I knew I would forget something. I forgot that actually I was supposed to launch a video, a short video that illustrates how technological developments are accelerating. And this is a video that has been prepared by Skills Development Scotland. So if you agree, let's launch this video now. Very impressive video, I should say. This is actually what Peter said. Huh? It's all about brains. This is what we have and nothing else. And it can do a lot, in in fact. And so I'd like now to turn to Margarita to ask you, representing the thousands of vocational education and training providers across Europe, but also you have experience from working in other continents, how can VET providers anticipate and adapt to these changing skills needs when developments are moving so fast?
It's okay. So I don't have one answer. I have several answers, and there's no solution, only one solution for this. But just sharing some hints. First, this video, we'll show it in our Vet Skills Week, in our workshop prepared by vet providers. I think it's very smashing. I've shown to my kids, they are 14 and 18, and I was surprised with a lot of things showing that way. And my kids told me, everybody is aware of it, except in our schools. Our teachers and our schools, I think they are not aware. We know that in YouTube, we know that with our bloggers, but nobody's aware in our schools. So it means something that we know about it. So I will tell that anticipation, it's one of the most critical procedure to make sure that we are satisfying clients. And our clients are our students, youngsters and adults, and our clients and are our companies. Of course, starting by the ordinary thing that everybody says that, okay, we have studies. Yes, we have a lot of studies, and I'm so glad that we have a lot of studies. There was recently launched the study from the Economic Forum. It was launched in September. CDFOP launched a very interesting study about digital skills. UNESCO and OECD, there's a lot of studies, but are vet providers reading and sharing and analyzing and including PDCA cycle, improving just in time our programs and our curriculum? I'm not really sure. And that's why, of course, studies, it's not, and reports and analysis worldwide, not only local, because sometimes we are vet providers, and it's very important to deal with local stakeholders, to deal with local employers, to deal with local industry, and also with our government, our policymakers. But we are preparing for global worlds. SMEs, the most sustainable SMEs, are working worldwide. And it's not only the big companies, aerospatial and aeronautics and so on. So we must not, the vet providers, we must not shut our eyes and be blind and only focus in local needs and national reports. And some of them, be careful, one thing is to have a very active observatory intelligent, business intelligence. Another thing is to have very bureaucratic data collection, and we must be careful about this. But the most important way of anticipating skills, it's to dialogue, having a sixth sense approach, listen our clients, listen the companies and our students. Listening, it means giving them the words, not going there and asking, what skills do you want? No, understand the business model. The world is changing. It's not only about robotics, 3D printing, computer programming, and ICT skills. It's also about that, but what is changing is the business model. And we are vet providers. We just don't deliver skills in that areas. We deliver skills in all the business model chain. So we deliver administratives, managers, leaders, program control, data analysis, workers. We deliver a lot of skills that are needed in a company. And it's important that we stand with the companies with a consultancy approach. what we call a sixth sense approach. And this is important to understand what are their problems, to become a partner as a vet center. And it's the best way of knowing the business and knowing about creating solutions with them. And skills are only a part of the solution. Sometimes we need to create projects together, we need to solve problems together, we need to train our trainers together with the companies, because they are 70% of the most important capacity in a training center. So everything is linked, and we need to have our eyes and our hearts open. Another thing, our clients are also the parents. The parents are very, very important, and it's more linked with the attractiveness of vet, but this is very important. It's not only our youngsters, the most critical voice that listen in their lives, and to make their choice if they go to vet or they go to general education and to high school and so on. It starts at home, it starts with their parents. If they are a believer in vet, if they are a believer in anticipating, in skills that they are useful for the future, they will be the first ones convincing their kids.
Thank you, Margarita. You put very much the emphasis on SMEs, and you said that today, actually, they are very successful companies operating on the internet. And so I'd like to turn with this to Monica. Monica, in Europe, the chambers represent extensively millions of small and medium-sized enterprises that really form the backbone of our economies. We always say that almost all the jobs are created in small companies. So how do you see these developments regarding skills? Are they a threat or an opportunity for small companies?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a pleasure to speak here also for Eurochambre, which is the European Association for the Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And as you said it, we represent a network of 1,700 chambers in 43 countries with about 20 million enterprises, which you said nearly 98% or something are SMEs. So this is very much important because I want to emphasize that these chambers, this network of chambers, are key players, are really active actors in imparting and in raising the skills. It's not only the role to represent the businesses in a political way, it's also to be active in this vocational education and training policy processes, also in other areas of building and lobbying for a framework, and nearly 80% of all these chambers are involved in this, and half of it, and this is also important, are really delivering initial training and vocational training. And if it comes now to these challenges, they were mentioned the day over, posed by the global trends, we see that, as Margarita mentioned it also, transforming industry, business models, and the skills. So, for instance, this shelf life of a skills set that an employee has or a SME has, that is shortened by all these trends. And Eurochambre did a survey last autumn. And so it comes out that the lack of skilled employees was identified as the fourth most significant challenge or threat for European entrepreneurs after domestic demand, economic policy matters, framework, and labor costs. And I think this is important. But there is the other side of the coin. If you're an active entrepreneur, an active enterprise, and you believe in this lifelong learning, as mentioned before, then you can have a big chance and good opportunities to work with these new technologies and all these new trends. And what we also must do then as a chamber or as a country is to keep up a dialogue between the world of education and the world of labor. It's very much important that the SMEs also can play an active role, for instance, in updating the curricula the learning, what is to be learned, which skills do the labor market need. And this continuous institutionalized dialogue is the necessary thing we should look at. And then we can be, or could find a lot of opportunities in our fourth industrial revolution.
And as you say, the shelf life of your skills is going to be shorter and shorter in the future. And I find this quite interesting because in my introduction I said, well, our children, they will have 2, 3 or 4 jobs. But I saw in the video that the point was that our children will have to invent their own jobs, which I find really a step very far if you look at the situation today. And on this, I'd like to now turn the floor to Joyce Bell. So you're representing a very big firm, very active in recruitment and staffing. And so can you explain to us how, from your perspective, you see these trends in skills, and what do you think are the main challenges in anticipating and developing the skills, these new skills, in this new environment?
Thank you. Yeah, we clearly see with our clients and of course ourselves a diversification in the way of work these days, and we do think that education is playing a big part in this. We are a strong believer in the expansion of work-based learning, with apprenticeships as a big part in this. The reason that, according to our opinion, it is a big part is because it's training and learning on the job with almost every time a guaranteed job outcome. During the apprenticeship, the worker is connecting with the employer, is learning the skills that are needed at that point of time in the labor market, and that could be future-proof. It's an innovative solution in a changing world. The younger generation is actually learning from the master on the floor, but at the same time, they can bring their own perspective of work. We have some very good examples what Adecco is doing with our clients in, for example, France and Italy. And what we see after the apprenticeships, most of them are actually hired by the client, which is a big success story. But if they're not hired, quite often Adecco actually hire them on a full-time, open-end agency contract. It's not a traditional way of work, but there's still a security for the worker that they have a job. Another example what we currently are doing is in Japan. It's one of our brands, VSN, where on a yearly basis we hire fresh graduated and we educate them in the environment of engineering. We actually were able to develop our own robots, and these days we have a lot of visitors coming by to see how this kind of model, work-based learning, works.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to open the floor and ask for remarks and also questions from the floor. I must say I was very impressed. I went to the competition to see the competition, and I'm really impressed by the fact that when you look at cooking, jewelry, fashion design, you can see that actually people, young people coming from different places all over this world, Iran, Colombia, South Korea, Europe, they are all using the same skills to perform very complicated tasks. So it tells us something, that these skills, they can be active everywhere in the world, and that basically our mission as employers, as service providers, as education system provider is basically to make it possible. So I'd like maybe with this to prompt some remarks, comments from you, questions. So who would like to come in, ask questions to our panel members? Somebody wants to cut the ice? It's always the most difficult to ask the first question or make the first remark. Yes, I'm sure you want to say something, otherwise we can move to the next session, but you are losing your chance to ask a difficult question to the panel. Okay.
Can I?
Yes, please.
It's a remark about what you said
Yes.
concerning the exhibition. It was my first time participating in this WorldSkills exhibition. I only participate at national level, and it's really very high level spots where we can learn with each other, vet providers, teachers, and students. And I had some conversations with some students about skills, future jobs, And one of the things, it was about happiness. And this is also about anticipating skills. So we are not only, we are responsible for the happiness of our future workers. And everything, every soft skills, everything related with problem solving, creativity, integrity, communication, reporting, blah, 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 everything is very important. But to ask them what are the critical factors about happiness, it's really, really important. And I had amazing answers.
Thank you. Peter, would you like to add something?
Yes, regarding the video that we saw in the second step, because it combines a bit our session with the session of this morning. When we talk about globalization and the demands for, or the consequences for skills, very often digitalization is seen as a driver, that's true. But at the same time, it's very often seen as a danger. And there we had a very interesting discussion this morning, coming to very different conclusions according to different situations in member states. I can say for Germany, we see digitalization in particular for VET as a chance, as an opportunity to improve attractiveness of VET, not as a kind of burden. We also don't see that we lose a lot of jobs via digitalization. They change, but our studies say we will lose in the next years about 1.5 million jobs on our labor market. At the same time, we gain nearly the same amount. The net minus would only be 40 to 60,000 jobs. So the situations in member states are very different, and we should not believe always this polarization views that there is the labor markets would shift to a very little group with minor qualifications and a top level with top qualifications. In between there's nothing. That's what you mentioned and what we are proud of, the middle class, so to say, yeah? Qualification level. That is also in the future the driver of our economy. So we think we should not get too anxious via this digitalization point. For me, the question of globalization of skills has to do with quality. If we want to be global players, we have to have top qualifications on a global scale. If we want to adapt to digitalization, we need transversal skills on top of the technical skills. All our studies and all our activities in Germany show that it's not a question of suddenly revolutionary new occupations or qualifications. It's add-on. It's added qualifications, for example, on data protection, on data storing, things like that that come up. So we should see this as an enrichment of our qualification processes rather than an endangerment. So we have quality, we have additional qualifications we need via digitalization. And the third one is, for me, a separate issue, that is the internationalization of qualifications or of skills in order to make us as a kind of open space for other world areas to come to us, to work in our countries or to learn in our countries and vice versa. And there I think there's a good toolbox also from the European Commission and the EU to help this process, and maybe we can come up with discussions on that in the next hour.
I totally agree with you on the fact that basically the message about doom and gloom on the labor market, this is actually not true. You have actually an evolution. It's a major shift, it's a transition, and it needs to be managed, it needs to be anticipated, but actually there will be more jobs. And actually the jobs that will appear, that are appearing now, they are interesting, because these are jobs with a lot of intellectual content and probably with higher wages as well. So I think it's interesting, but of course it puts a big responsibility on all of us, because we have to help to manage those transitions. I'd like perhaps to give the floor to Matthaus, if you want to come in on this point. Yes?
Yes, I would like to comment also on the video, because at the end, I don't know if everyone could see it, there was a very important question. It was, should we become more human? Should we also focus more on human beings? And I would clearly say yes, because we are the ones inventing the machines, inventing new technologies, who in some cases, or in a lot of cases, taking away working spaces. So we, as the future of the global, we have to also focus on the global being, on the human being, especially when it comes to the future generations, to young people, and in the education. So to come back to this question, there's a clear yes, we have to focus more on human being as well.
Thank you very much for this contribution. Let me ask again if there is anybody who would like to come in to ask a question, make a comment before we move. Yes, please. Can you introduce yourself at the same time, please?
Can you hear me? Yes. My name is Koos Olivier. I'm from South Africa. I'm from the Labour side. My question is, when you come out of school and you've just studied for some sort of a job, in the labour market, when you apply for that job, the employers always ask for 4 to 5 years experience. Now my question is where are you going to get that experience if the employer is not going to give you that opportunity to show yourself?
Thank you for the question. Let's get maybe another question or two others. Anybody else? Yes.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Giles Umezi, from Nigeria, the Edo State government. We are looking at reforming our TVET system. And I've listened to the panel talk about changes in the workforce globally. What I'd like you to tell me or advise is, how do African economies that don't have the same opportunities or aren't as developed as the rest of the world catch up? What do you think the consequence of, say, digitization, AI would be to somewhere like Nigeria that is not quite industrialized? I'll be very interested to understand what the panel thinks about that, because of course we'd like to learn to see how we position ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. There's another person asking for the mic here.
My name is Dr. Dali Koshi from India, New Delhi. My question is, several societies and countries are aging population. Some countries have 20%, like Japan, I think about 20-24% aging people. And degreening, as they say, the children are not sufficiently born. At the same time, in China and India together must be the largest number of youth. Average median age of Indian youth is about 28-29. And it's likely this golden spot will last till 2050, when the current pyramidal structure will start becoming like a kite. Now, my question is, how are we going to look at countries which are having surplus of, talent, and countries which are having deficit talent? And you mentioned about international qualifications and mobility across countries and continents. How do you look at this phenomenon of some societies and countries having serious problems in terms of looking at, the manufacturing jobs or any other kind of jobs? And we find this a very interesting proposition, because we believe that India could become a global supplier of labor resources, for example.
Yeah. Thank you. Maybe we ask our panel members to reply to your questions. So I'd like to ask which one of these questions you'd like to cover. I think, Peter, the question, there were some references several times to international qualifications, so perhaps you want to come in again on this point and develop it.
Yes, already via your questions, one can see that we are a bit Eurocentristic in our group here, because we can't or did not cope with the challenges of other world regions. As concerns this question from South Africa, I would say this is up to the changers to answer how strongly industry and entrepreneurs will adapt to young people and open up for young people and their careers. You asked about this 45 years of experience, right? Before you get a job as a young person. We have the same problem in Germany as well, but luckily a demographic problem. So the market turned definitely now to the young people. They can choose, and the employers have to apply for young people at the moment. So it's a good situation for them. Concerning India's question, it's really a difficult one. I know how big this country is. I know how many young people are there with solid qualifications, probably not the possibility to use them in their country. And on the other hand, one has to be, if one is frank, also its limits as concerns international mobility. There are limits in any member state. We face now, for example, in Germany, the situation there were 1.4 million new refugees. They have to be integrated into the labor market. They have to be trained. Many of them are not really high qualified. This means at the same time that those who are gifted, who come with a lot of qualifications, don't have the same access to our labor market as they had before. Yeah? So there are limits, I can understand that. But as concerns international qualifications, I'm convinced that we have some blueprints where we can learn from. The one is the place where we are here. It's WorldSkills. And WorldSkills combines vocational training efforts of 75 countries with very different vet systems, It's only a minority of 5, I think, or 6 who have a dual system. All others are partly on a semi-academic, partly on a vet school-based approach. Nevertheless, all of us have the same standards here for performance. All of us have the same standards for examination, and that already for half a century. This competitions run for 50 years. So I could imagine that you learn from this kind of standard that developed also about minimum common denominators among our countries. I would estimate, at least for the region Europe, I can't say that worldwide, I'm not expert in the global perspective there, but for example, a car mechatronic, whether it comes from Portugal, from Finland, from Spain, or from France, doesn't make a difference for 40%, 50% of the qualification, and that means you have a minimum standard already. You have a standard already that could be taken also as a kind of currency for international cooperation. The same is true, and then I finish with another EU instrument that is just developing. It's called ESCO. This is a kind of taxonomy where all the European member states, 28 or even more, decided that all relevant occupations in Europe would get standardized. So they defined the occupation, and then they defined the skills packages within this occupation. So you have standards. If you look to them closer, you will find out the same, that in many countries the skills demands are the same for the occupation. So you could develop out of that a kind of minimum denominators for international recognition without, and that's forbidden in Europe, harmonizing top-down this qualification. It's already so much there on common ground that we could make something out of that as a kind of European occupational profiles, or even taking the WorldSkills dimension, global profiles, occupational profiles.
Thank you very much, Peter. Joyce, can I turn to you on this point of work experience? Because as a private company, you must have clients asking for too long experience.
Or the other way around.
Exactly. So how do you go about it?
I think a very practical example, and it's actually a little bit the other way around, and to focus more on this area here in the Middle East. Here in the UAE, we have actually a relative small workforce with a lot of open roles. And if we see here ATNEC as an example, the people that are working here are actually partly recruited by ADECO. And obviously they're coming from other parts of the world where we recruit them overseas. They come here to the UAE, get provided by, in this case, ATNEC, a training of a couple of weeks, and then work in this venue. And I think that's the other way, how we reverse it and are able actually to support in the skills gap as well.
Thank you. Monica, would you like to respond to the point on the difference between companies in the industrialized world and in the developing world? How would you think they differ concerning skills development?
Yes, they differ mainly a little bit, but I think that the focus should be on that what could be in common. I mean, the technical knowledge, and then this refers to the question that firms ask for an experience of 20 or 10 years in the sector, in the branch. That is the one thing. But the educational and the vocational education and training systems should be more focused on the basic skills, I mean literacy, numeracy, and ICT now, and on these transversal or soft skills, because that is this main point that supports your whole working life. You have to know how to communicate, you have to know how to solve a problem, how you learn to learn, and you must learn up to the age of me, you know. So you mean you must know how to learn. And this is very, very much important, I think, this lifelong learning idea. And then it comes up to that I'm always really convinced that an entrepreneurial mindset should be raised within a school. Yes, I mean, a little bit thinking in budgeting and what is necessary, input-output relations, self-employment a little bit. I think that is a very important point, and that we should all have in common worldwide.
I do agree, because in addition, the way the world of work is evolving means that actually our children will sometimes be at the same time employee in a firm and also self-employed. So this is something which is really important for the development of our children. And actually this is something on which the developing world is doing extremely well. Entrepreneurship is actually quite active in the developing world. Now, we have already started to talk about internationalization, and this is the second round of our discussion here. I think the issue is very much what kind of competencies do you need to have an international career? And here we're talking about job-specific competencies, but also transversal knowledge, language competencies, for example. I mean, in the European Union, for us, internationalization is a given. We are 28 countries, Peter was saying it. When we have to agree among ourselves about particular competencies in a given field or qualifications, it's already a long discussions, I can tell you. But I think it does not stop at the European Union. We have to look at the broader context, and in a global world, qualifications, skills have to be standard across the world. And as I said, when you go in this exhibition, when you see the competitions, you can see that it is actually the case. So I'd like to call in this round, maybe as a first speaker, Matthaus, if you want to come in. You're coming from Germany, and you are also a member of the new European Apprentice Networks. So how do you see the possibilities for international careers for graduates from vocational education and training?
Yes, firstly, I would like to say that I had the opportunity to attend the first ever WorldSkills Youth Forum the last 2-3 days, which was a very great experience for me, and I can say also for all the other 200 participants from 70 countries from all 6 continents worldwide. And it was really amazing to realize that we all could share the same visions on the future of work, on the future we want to live in, and the future we want to create right now already, because it's not only to think about the future, we have to work on it right now. And I think that it's nice to see that we as the young people realized it, that we are responsible for the future. But come back to your question. I can answer sharply, yes, it is possible for young people who have done a VET program to get an international career. But something that we have to provide them with, we have to give them the skills, the demanded skills, and we need to ensure that there's an environment created to work laterly, maybe in an international company or institution. So I can say, for example, from my side, I have done my apprenticeship, my VET in Germany in a public service. 3 years was the program. Then I was working 6 years in a public service in Germany, and now I decided to study. I study right now abroad. So I can say a little bit, I'm living the European dream. I'm born in Poland, grew up in Germany, and studied and worked in Germany. Now living in France, studying there, and working in Belgium for CESI. So it is possible for young people to achieve international careers, but we need to, from my point of view, provide them with 2 very important factors. The first one is we need to ensure that VET systems, programs include time abroad for these young people, because abroad they can learn different languages. We need to speak all a good English, and this is not the case still now. We're speaking to other young people as well worldwide, and we need to ensure that they have the soft skills, the intercultural skills. We have to be more open-minded to work on other continents maybe in the future. And the other thing is, the very important factor is that we need to recognize what we were already speaking, the skills, and we need to recognize the achieved certificates. And this is something very hard, even within the European Union. I was just speaking last month in the Basque country in Spain to some VET students, and when they finished their VET program, these certificates are only recognized in the Basque country, not even in whole Spain. This cannot be the case in the 21st century in Europe. We have to work on this. We have to be recognized EU-wide. We have to be recognized one day globally to have an easier transition for international and global labor market.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to say a word about the European Network for Apprentices. I think it's quite an important initiative because it's what we discussed this morning. You need to have policies which are not developed only by policymakers, by stakeholders, by a lot of old people. You need also to have policies where the apprentices themselves are part of the decision. So this is really about getting concrete, but with the young people who are in apprenticeship. So that's why I really think it's important. Let me turn to Barthélemy Deutsch. You are a previous WorldSkills champion, so you are really an example of what excellence means. And I'd like to ask you about whether vocational education and training, from your perspective, is able to keep up with the pace of technological and societal developments and to provide international opportunities for learners?
Well, on the technological evolution of vocational education, I think it is possible to keep up with the pace that we have. We have been actually discussing that yesterday and the day before with the youth forum, and that was something that really came up as an issue, the fact that education was not able to always follow. We thought it was possible by having a better partnership between between the education system and the company system up to the political level. So we were seeing, and we see always the education minister, for example, here today, they're all here, and we think it's great, but we think also we should talk about education with the ministers of all the field. So there is a real connection and partnership between all the political level, so everything can grow and come at the same times. On the international part of vocational education, there is no such a thing as a student being learning, for example, cooking as I did, and that will stay obviously in Belgium. My first job that out of all my internship was actually in England. So as soon as I've graduated from my school, I went in England, then I came back in Belgium, I went in Spain, Scotland, now I'm in Paris. So I think international development it's totally part of vocational education, because to grow in those studies in those fields, sharing is the best way to do, and go and grab the best opportunity you have all over the place. It is the only way you're gonna grow and go faster and further. I share actually Matthias when he said that we have to offer the opportunity for the young to go abroad. But I would also add to that we have to offer the teacher to go abroad. I think putting in place a kind of Erasmus Plus program for the teacher, if it's not in place already, would be great. So, for example, an exchange between a Spanish teacher and an English teacher. So the teacher will learn more about culture, but also the student will learn a new language while they're actually studying it. That will bring a lot of diversity in their studies, and also a new language, adaptability, flexibility. Those are all the required skills, soft skills, or skills in general that I think are most important for international career.
Thank you very much, and thank you for mentioning Erasmus. As some of you may know, Erasmus is a European program which is extremely successful. And this year we are celebrating the 30th year anniversary of Erasmus. This is a very effective program. If you ask the question to many Europeans, they will remember Erasmus. I'm not sure they will remember the Euro or Schengen, but they always quote Erasmus as a positive example. And I must say that indeed we are now trying to develop and extend the same concept for apprentices, also for vet learners and for vet teachers. I think there is a lot of potential, and it helps very much to develop the international skills which we are speaking about. Let me turn now to Joyce. Joyce, our two youth representatives here mentioned a lot transversal skills in their remarks. So could you say a little bit more about the kind of skills that you think are needed in order to facilitate international opportunities for learners?
Yes, of course, and I personally like this question, being 13 years with Adecco, and have had the opportunity to work and live in 4 different countries. I learned a lot because when you make that move, quite often you're successful in your home country, and then we take you out and put you in a new environment and expect you to be successful again. It doesn't always work like that. And I learned quickly that it's not only about the hard skills. The key to success is quite often the soft skills and the cultural fit, and things that I have learned along the way, and I would love to have learned before I made the move, is basically 3 things, and I've heard them quite a few times. The adoption, communication, and I don't mean the communication we are used to do at home, but how do you communicate across different cultures? And network abilities. How are you able to not only build up your network at home, but how are you able to position yourself in a new environment? And what kind of skills do you need to build your personal elevator pitch that people remind you and want to work with you? And when we talk about adoption, and I think I had to learn it the hard way, moving from the Netherlands, where we are quite open and direct, moving to China in a total different culture, it was very difficult to achieve my goals in the first 7-8 months. And I think that are skills, if we are able to integrate them in education, young people can be much more successful from day one.
I do agree. Can I turn to you, Peter? In your first intervention, you mentioned migration, which has a huge impact on some of our European countries. And it's clear that Germany, Sweden, in particular, they have made a lot of efforts to integrate migrants in the labor market very quickly, and this is actually happening. But there is a sort of paradox because, for example, Germany is in need of a lot of skilled workers for the future. That's a fact. At the same time, you receive a lot of people who do not have skills yet. So how do you manage this paradox? And I'm also talking to some colleagues from other countries. They complain that too many young people are leaving for Germany. For example, you have a lot of Spanish young people going to Germany, and you have a lot of complaints in Spain because they say, well, basically this is brain drain. We paid for the education of these young people, and now they work in Germany. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Obviously, these young people like rainy countries like Germany. Yes, we have a strong push of new migrants. As I said, about 1.4 million the last 2 years, coming from different world regions. Some of them having quite good qualification profiles. Some of them being in the medium level, but a lot of them on a very low level. That means that you have to develop strategies and solutions with different speeds. And I would say for those with qualifications, we really have a good tool and a good instrument that is a National Recognition Act that allows everyone that comes from abroad, never mind from which country, to mirror her qualification towards the German qualification. And so you have an individual right to go through that process and at the end of the day to get the confirmation, either it's fully equal or it's partly equal. And if it's partly equal, you can go, and there's public funding for that, to top your qualification up to the level that is needed for the German labor market. So that system works. Unfortunately, most of the refugees, for example, are not able to fulfill this kind of minimum requirements of, let's say, 30, 40, 50% of a qualification that you should have before you get into that process. For a lot of refugees, we have quick tests, competence tests, in their languages, in Arabic, in different languages, in Farsi, in a lot of languages, to check out what their profiles might be. If it's a lower one, we try to adapt individually courses, trainings, also in-company trainings for them, which is nice on the paper, but very hard in the day-to-day business because there are several challenges we face there. It starts already with the fact that many of the refugees had to pay when they went away from Syria or other countries to Germany, and the ones who were the traffickers ask for the money, so they have to pay back. This is an illegal market, but it's working. So many refugees have to go quickly to the labor market to make money in order to pay back, or to compensate their families at home. That's the second point. And it's not easy to convince them to do an apprenticeship for 500 euro or 600 euro a month compared to a salary as an unskilled worker of 1,700 or 1,800. So that's already one of the challenges. The other one is definitely intercultural competences of the young people. You have to adapt to a new society with its rules. You have to understand, that's what you said from the other side, when you as a Dutch went to Arabic countries, for example. That's the process for them as well. That takes a while. And for sure, the language. We found out that if you don't have this kind of B level in the language scale, in German, you are not able to really understand training and to understand labor markets, and you can't get in touch with clients. So you have to invest quite a lot in the beginning, and that takes, from my estimation, minimum 3 to 5 years until you have a big proportion of these people on the labor market. From the 1.4 million people, there's 50% below 25, and 70% of them are male, most of them alone, so it's also a social problem, and we try to adapt with that as quickly as possible. But as I said, it takes a couple of years until you see them really in the labor market. At the moment, I can give you just the latest data for our apprenticeship market. There are maybe 8,000 young people that can apply for the labor for the apprenticeships out of 100,000 of young people. Yeah? So it's a long way to go still, but there's a huge investment now. It's really billions that are invested in the preparatory courses and qualifications of these young people, because we think it's not only a burden, it's really also a chance for us. As you said, we lack skilled labor. We need more young people. We are an aging society, so we also see the advantages of this development. It's a good investment.
Thank you very much. This is actually a good transition now to open the floor to some questions and remarks. I think the question of languages is fairly difficult indeed. I can notice, for example, for anybody to learn French, Swedish, or German coming out of Europe, that's tough, right? And it takes time. And I think what is also interesting is what Peter said about the tools which are now put in place in order to help the refugees to evaluate their skills, get their qualifications recognized, and help them to integrate the labor market quickly. I think there is something to learn about this for a wider population, because we are also talking a lot about informal learning and how to recognize skills that have been acquired informally. I think that can be also put to use on this. With that, I'd like to, you have requested for the floor, so I hope a microphone can come to you quickly. If not, I will throw my microphone to you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Kasibant is my name, from Uganda. I want to talk to my brother and my sister who are saying that working from one country to another is good, but what we need to have, I think we need to have a program of exchange of maybe exchange of employees, such that in case there is an institution, they have a program, we can have that exchange program whereby some technical teachers can go to another institution in another country. They get to know the customs, and such that those students are well prepared. They know that when I go to another country, this is what they do and this is what they use. So at the end of the day, after leaving your country and going to another country, you reach there when you know everything. So I would request that we should have an exchange program which can help our learners, which can help our students, such that they get to know what is done from different countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe 1, 2 other questions, remarks? Okay. So maybe I'll ask one of our panel members to answer or to react to this point. Who would like to take the issue? Yes. Yes, I can say something about it, but I'm sure it will be less interesting than you. No, just I mentioned earlier Erasmus, and we have this 30 years anniversary now. And this is a very successful program, which we have actually extended also in other countries. We have what is called Erasmus Mundus with other parts of the world. And this is something that I can see is possible also for apprentices and for vet learners. And now we have this first experience for vet learners inside Europe, but I could see indeed the potential to do it between Europe and other parts of the world. By the way, I think it should not necessarily be between Europe and countries. It could also be between Uganda and other countries of the world. This is, as you say, this is something which is fairly effective in getting a young person to understand quickly a different culture, and this is something that stays with you for the rest of your life. I mean, Erasmus is so successful that people say that you have 1 million Erasmus babies, meaning people who, during their Erasmus programs, met somebody and then they were married, etc. So it seems that, I don't know if the statistics is true, but they say 1 million Erasmus babies. So maybe any of my fellow panel members want to come in on this point of the exchange programs. I mean, you mentioned that in ADECO, you actually have the equivalent of an exchange program.
Yeah, the first reason why I actually moved out to China was we started a joint venture there with a state-owned company, so with a very local company, and I moved there basically to share my experience in the group. So we didn't have the ambition to set up an international company, but we wanted to work on the ADECO corporate standards. For me, it was an excellent exchange to learn more about our company in a different country and different culture. And I think it also helped in a big part in engagement. How do you keep your people and how can you make them more value for the organization? And I think that's something we did very strong, because the idea was for me to move for 1 year outside of China. That's almost 8 years ago, and I never went back. But I do think that as a learning, putting people in a sales role in another team, in another nationality, it definitely developed your personal interaction, communication skills.
Barthélemy, after your education, you said that you worked in different European countries. So what did you learn from this mobility experience?
Well, obviously, first of all, language. When I walked out of my school, I was one of the best in my class in English, and I arrived in England, and I realized that the level was more than terrible. I couldn't speak at all. I had to do my first interview in English properly by sign. To say that I would stay between 1 and 2 years, I had to use my fingers. So that was how bad I was. So first of all, obviously language, adaptability, be able to be thrown in something that you don't know, somewhere that you don't know, with no one that you know, and be able to survive and pass over that, and then you learn, and then you go and throw yourself somewhere else, and you adapt yourself again. It's a bit more easier, but you learn so much more by traveling and going away than by staying at home. So going abroad and meeting new people is super important. Once again, I mention again Erasmus Plus because I am currently doing this program, so thanks a lot. This is very supportive, and those kind of program, without those kind of program, I am sure that I would have never done what I've done so far. So if there is Erasmus Mundo coming up, I'm sure this is a good idea for Uganda to take part of it, because it helps a lot. And it can even be a smaller exchange. For example, my school, where I was studying back at the time in Belgium, when I was studying cooking, they did an exchange of a week with the school of Shanghai. So an entire class or two came in Belgium and exchanged about their culture, our culture, how we cook, how they cook, and the entire school in Belgium and the entire school in Shanghai gained a lot by this exchange only of few days. So it doesn't have to be very expensive and very long, 6 months. It can just be a week. Even a week will give you much more than a month in your country. So I really think it shouldn't be an issue to travel, and you just have to make it happen.
Thank you very much, Barthélemy, for sharing your experience. Anybody else from the audience wants to make a remark before we move to the third round? No, this is not the case. You can still come in the third round. So let's move to the final round of our discussion. And the final round is all about the attractiveness of VET. I mean, we have discussed this push for high-level skills all across the world, the opportunities that this represents in terms of international careers, but we have this issue that VET is regarded as B-grade education. And I mentioned it this morning, but for me this is really damning evidence that something is wrong. We have a situation where it is proven that VET is more effective than general education in finding a job, in delivering skills, and at the same time, when you talk to the Europeans, the majority of them believe that low-grade students go to VET. So something is not working in the way VET is perceived. And so I'd like first to launch a video. I'm told in my briefing that there will be a video to illustrate the European Vocational Skills Week, which is a campaign we are launching in November in order to boost the attractiveness of VET.
Ik denk dat zo'n evenement een ander perspectief biedt op de mbo'ers.
Das Handwerk besteht vor allem aus kleinen und kleinsten Unternehmen und für diese ist es natürlich interessant, ein Stück weit Rückenwind zu bekommen, um für Nachwuchs zu werben, um auf sich aufmerksam zu machen.
Today we have been talking a lot about the future. I believe the future is here.
Die duale Ausbildung bei der Firma Fuchs & Gierke hat eine ganz entscheidende Rolle, weil sie sichert uns den Nachwuchs, den wir für die Zukunft brauchen.
Ik doe mee aan het Alumni Event, omdat de oud-alumni-studenten, die zijn mijn opening naar de beroepswereld en dat zijn de ervaringsdeskundigen.
So with this introduction, I'd like perhaps to start with Margarita. And my question is, first of all, what do you think of this kind of campaigns? Are they needed? And do you think they can make a difference?
Yes, I think this campaign, this special campaign, it's very important. Once again, we are you. The European Commission, but with the VET providers and VET stakeholders, we are putting in this campaign the voices of our clients, so the business, our students, and I would say it's the best way of doing campaigns. It's to transform the clients into marketeers. They are the best marketeers we can have in the world. But I will say yes, but it's not enough. We need to go further to create more attractiveness in VET. And I will start first, try to change the name. VET, TVET. So we need to rebrand, to think about rebranding this thing, because especially for kids, it's not really attractive, this name. And I think when we are talking about the attractiveness, and the attractiveness of our clients, we need to go further. Sometimes we had the perceptions and they think, well, what is attractive for me? It's like this, but we need to have more solid, when we are doing campaigns, we need to have more solid insights about what will change. We are convincing whom. And this new methodology, so-called, which is not new, it's a very old one, but we need to use it more often. behavior economy and to look at behaviors insights. I mean, what is the nudge that will change the mindset of the students in order to make sure that they will follow vets, parents, and also human resources managers or productivity people which are responsible for hiring. And this is important to make sure what is really attractive. I would add something more in this video. It's about everything related with gaming, technology, virtual reality. Of course, it's important to have all the traditional skills there, but for youngsters, they are virtual. They are simulation. They are living with simulators. They are living with virtual reality. They are living with robots. They are living with based on internet communities and so on. And this is the kind of hints that attract youngsters to our training courses. Another thing, which I think it's important, it's to give examples after vets. So skills tracking and the voice of former students, it's really, really important. And also the added value of their training curriculum. And coming back to international qualifications, if we make an effort to link our national qualifications with international qualifications and certification, make sure that it's an added value. We have a lot of examples all over the world. Tomorrow we'll listen a very good example about the welding and the work done with the Welding Federation, but there's a lot of them, logistics, safety, and this is really important. So sometimes these questions, I need somebody with 4 years or 5 years and experience. There's soft mechanisms, soft tools that could decrease this kind of requests from the employer side, such as international qualifications linked with the VET programs. And so I don't have 5 years, but I have an international qualification, which is linked. And the other thing is work-based learning and the added value that the employers gave to the students while they were in the work-based learning environment, participating on decisions, not only doing tasks, but participating in the corporative things. So the voice is there. We should be a little bit further on and make sure they are happy. I don't think, I'm not sure if you have this, all of this in your backpack. I think it was a very happy sentence, Norbert and your team. But what is good for youth, it's good for business. And it's really important to have this in mind when we do any campaign. Thank you.
And I think what is important with this VET Week is very much that this is an occasion to showcase best practices. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that Europe is doing well. We have powers that we exercise, but at the end of the day, what is most effective in terms of policy development is to be able, the kind of policies which have been applied on the ground and have been successful, and which are then used by other countries. We have, in fact, in Europe, a very successful VET system which exists in Austria, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Sweden, and you can see that other countries are now gradually implementing, adapting to their own circumstances this kind of system. So this is what Europe is about. Now, let me turn to Monica. Monica, I'd like to ask you, what are the main challenges for vocational education and training in terms of image, and how can we boost its attractiveness?
Yeah, the parents were addressed in the statements before, and I think there is one of the solutions. I mean, as you said, in general education, it's quite clear a student has to get as much or as many knowledge, general knowledge as possible from a primary to higher schools up to university and get a university degree, and that's the future. And VIT is somehow another attitude. I don't know why. I think one is the threat of the parents. That's a one-way street or a dead-end street, some or other way. And I think there we have, as a system, as a VIT system, as a country, we have to work that there is a kind of permeability between the educational pathway. If you start with one, it's not said that you never will enter a university or something. Yeah, so you must get the connection links without barriers for the young people. And that must be visible and clear and discussed in a system. I think this is one of the ideas which is, well, it could lead to a good future, for a better future, for the image of VIT. And the other thing we saw there, I think initiatives with a good communication and PR aspects are very, very important. This is the New Skills Week, that's the WorldSkills, why we are here. And it's, of course, also the EuroSkills, you know, it's always changing EuroSkills and WorldSkills. And what the funny thing is in the EuroSkills especially is there is a competition of the individual occupations, but there is also a kind of competition between systems, because we have the dual system, apprenticeship system in Central Europe. We have this very much school-based vocational education and training, more in the northern countries or in Asia. And we have this more company-specialized system like in US and other countries. And it's also very interesting in these skills and to talk about what is the better system, what can lead to the same goal or not. I think it's very important, and I think to be active in that is important. And so I must say I'm very proud that in 2020 the EuroSkills will take place in Austria, and I kindly invite all of you to Graz, which is a very nice little country in the south of Austria. We are looking forward with tension and joy to the EuroSkills then.
Also looking forward to joining you there. I must say the point you made about avoiding that VET is a separate path from general education, that I think is quite important. Because for parents, it's very clear that if they have the impression that by sending their kids to VET, it's going to be that and only that, they will see that as a dead end. So I think the issue is very much how we can create bridges between the two. But now I think we have to ask our young colleagues here why actually they choose vocational education and training, and have you ever felt that you were a sort of second grade student or learner? I think that's maybe a crude question, but I think it's a moment where we have to ask them. Maybe starting by you, Matthaus.
Yes, thinking back when I was young, or let's say younger, or when I finished my secondary school, why I chose to VET or an apprentices program. Honestly, when you're a young person in the age of 18, 17, finishing your school, you are very lost in this very big world of the labor market. You get so many informations, you have also so many opportunities what to do laterwards. So it was for me very hard to decide what I want to do, but at least my family helped me. They said, firstly start with an apprenticeship, and then you can see what's going on afterwards. And this is the case with the most of the young people, I would say. You have the big influence of your family, of your parents, and they often, like for example in Germany, the VET and apprenticeship system is very well known, so young people and families are more open to offer it to their children and to promote it. And this is something we also have to we are coming up at the European Apprentices Network, which was established this year or installed by the Commission. And it's a great expert group. We call us an expert group. We are 9 young people from different countries speaking about the needs of young apprentices with the European context. And as it was already mentioned, it's very important not only to speak about the young people, but to speak with them. Because we have done this VET systems by ourselves, and we know the problems which are existing, and we know the needs which are existing from young people, from young apprentices. And that's why we are focusing right now on we have 7 priorities, and one of them, priorities we are working now right on is to promote the VET systems EU-wide, because we think that is a great alternative to going to study. You have great work opportunities afterwards, and we just have to show it to the young people. So we need more career guidance and show that doing a VET does not only mean that when you're finished, it's all. You can still go on. You can go on working abroad, as discussed already. You can also go on and continue your studies, but it's a first great ground to get as a young person to do a VET system program and to enter the labor market easily.
Thank you. Barthélemy?
Yeah. For me, what drove me into these studies is basically my passion. I really had a passion for cooking and for waiting restaurant service, and that allowed me to overcome all the view or the misconception of those studies. I never felt myself as a second-grade student because I did what I loved, but obviously I could face that. I could face those questions. Why did you took those studies? Did you have to, or did you choose to? It felt like I failed in regular studies, so I had to take something easier. Those people who asked me that never tried my studies and didn't know that it was actually harder than their studies, because I had to stay up until 4 in the morning sometimes to learn my work and to serve and to actually work while I was studying. And so as it was while I was studying, I had to be at school the next day and be able to sit down and listen. So it was actually harder. So I wouldn't have done it if it was not for passion. So make it more attractive. It is hard for me to tell how, because I feel it's very attractive. I don't see how it cannot be. I went out of my school with the same degree of my fellow friends, but in addition, I could do something with my hands, I could do something more. So I went out with more than what they did. I could work, I could go into the working life while they had to stay at school at least 3 more years. So it's just beneficial. So I think we have to explain to everyone that it is not less but more, and everything that they're going to study at university and everything, it all comes down to the skills and to those less good studies as they say. For example, Tesla, we see artificial intelligence. It's great, but if we don't have anyone to actually try to make it work, to connect the dots and the wires together, the best idea of Elon Musk will never work. So it all comes down to those manual work and jobs that you all see around here in WorldSkills. So it's very important to showcase that it all comes together to make it innovation. And to bounce back on Margarita comment of the voice of the youth, I think it's actually very important. And for all of you, you're all coming from different country, and you have 1,300 youth out there ready to be ambassadors for your country and back to your country, and they're all passionate of those studies. So please go and see them, go and ask them to talk for you. If they are afraid or whatsoever, we are 9 champion trusts that are representing the entire WorldSkills world. So we are ready for you to talk and to be able to go up and speak and to connect with kids that are not sure of taking those studies. We would love to see more young people on those areas, so please come up and see us.
Thank you very much for your contributions. I should say one of the things which is important, earlier we said that it's really important in the world of work, which is changing so fast, to have skills which also help you to learn, and help you also to make your transition to a different career, to a different profession. So I think the thing with VET is also that it needs to evolve to create bridges for other VET education, for the general education. I mean, imagine you're a baker, one day you can become a lawyer, or the reverse. I think that's the kind of things we are talking about. So how to manage those transitions mean actually that for parents, they will be more comfortable if they know that if their child is going to learn bakery, in 5 years he can become a lawyer if he wants, which I will not advise, but maybe it may come that way.
As you say, on the other way around, we see a lot of 40 years old adults, for example, that are on the financial district and drop everything and goes cooking. You never see the opposite. Maybe the young kids that choose TVET are actually smarter because they did it before.
Exactly. That's a very good point. With this, can I ask for any remarks, contributions from the floor? Yes? You will have a mic. Yes.
Thank you. It was an excellent session, first of all. My compliments to all. The question to Margarita's comment is what made me, India is a caste-ridden society, and every manual work was associated with certain caste. For example, a leather worker was called mochi, and it became a derogatory word. A tailor was called a darzi, and it became a derogatory word. But if there is a commonality between the skills and the definitions of those skills, for example, when carpenter became interior decorator, it became acceptable in Indian society. A barber who was cutting hair was not acceptable. Nobody wanted the job. But today the beauty salons are plenty. Every nook and corner of India has a beauty salon. And they are accepted. They're very handsome people who are working in those places. It has become acceptable in society. So one needs to really look at this nomenclature of these jobs and how we look at it. Because in certain societies, you can only remove the stigma attached by completely redefining the job profiles and the kind of titles which you use. For example, when we wanted to open 200 centers under the, for doing the sewing operation for the apparel sector, we didn't call it tailoring school. We just called it SMART. Skills for manufacturing of apparel through research and training. And people started joining. We trained 200,000 people. So it is important that this question is addressed. India government started a program through the UGC, University Grants Commission approval, called BVOC, Bachelor of Vocational Education. And again, from BA, BSc kind of nomenclature, there is an inherent differentiation which has come in, because it has become BVOC. 2,000 hours of domain skills and 1,000 hours of general inputs. People start differentiating this in the mind. So my request to WorldSkills body and the people, the experts who work in and the youngsters who are part of this network is to really come out with the taxonomy, a common, worldwide nomenclature change of the professions to the digital age which now we represent. It will help other countries to say that, look, the WorldSkills has accepted this nomenclature of jeweler, welder, whatever, into these nomenclature. And therefore, the countries should become agnostic to caste and differentiation of the color, creed, and, the kind of changes which make people look down upon these jobs. This is just a comment, and probably you people could have some discussion at European Commission or wherever. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very interesting and useful comment. I should say the taxonomy we are developing in Europe is called ESCO. Peter mentioned it. And it's actually a common language to identify skills and competencies so that employers in, say, Germany can recognize and understand the skills which are presented to them by a Polish young person. So it's a very interesting project. But Peter, I'm sure you want to intervene on this.
I just wanted to answer a bit your question how we could do that on a global scale. I think we are, more than 200 countries on the world. If every country would work with every country bilaterally, we would have 10,000 of agreements. So I think it's better to have a supranational level, either via the political level, via governments, or via the branches. In Europe, we have the sectors, the European sectors, that develop their minimum standards in the field of automotive, in the field of aviation, in the field of IT. There are, I think, a set of minimum 15 or even more. We have experts, Jens Björnevold from CDVP, who knows it much better than me, and Mr. Kalecha. But they developed a kind of common denominators, what their minimum standards are for the qualification. And I could imagine that via different supranational organizations, for example, UNESCO and UNIVOC, one could have a kind of global network of spiders in the net, that the region Europe is working with the region Asia on an exchange of this kind of branch minimum standards with your stakeholders of this branch. So this kind of dialogue could be established. It's a dream. We can't decide that today, but this might be an option, because I'm also convinced that we have in many professions, in particular tailor and so on, where India is very strong, a lot of common denominators, and nobody knows it, and that's the main reason why we don't accept each other so much with our qualifications. I'm not talking about formal recognition, which is another issue. Even among Austria and Switzerland and Germany, the recognition is not always working very well. So it's really more transparency and acceptability on the labor market. May I just say a last word to the question of attractiveness? I think we can do a lot of campaigns. We support the European campaign. We have a German campaign. But if we don't get an attractive offer for the young people, we are lost with campaigns. In Germany, we have now more than 50% of school leavers not going to vocational training, not going to the dual system anymore. They go to universities. So if we want to get them back or get them into the system, we have to be as attractive as the universities. And time is too short to tell now what we do there, but we have a whole set of instruments on permeability, on promotion grants, on double studies, on double qualifications in VET and in higher education in order to allow for that. But even that is getting more difficult now, because we have to face, at least in Germany, I don't know how it's in other areas, or in Europe, I would say, in other world regions, with the Generation Z. And if I asked my daughter to go to vocational training, when she was 17, she said, I did not invest 2 years more in the gymnasium in order to go to vocational training. Now with the gymnasium, with the baccalaureate, I'm able to go to university, so I get a better payback of my investment. Yeah, that's how they think. And very often, and that's proven by studies in Germany, young people say, I qualify to the maximum, but I keep my freedom also to the maximum until the very last stage before I decide for a specific occupation. So I'm very lucky that you had found your occupation quite early and said, I'm convinced of it, I'm full of passion with it. That's what we want. But the young people are more and more tricky and say, I wait, I take my time, I take this qualification, more general ones, and only in the last part of my education career, I decide. That's why many people, including me, got lawyers and not bakers. Because with this kind of qualification, you have the option at the very last day. In my case, it was 28 years to decide where you want to go.
No, but I think this is also making the case for creating a path to VET and general education which is more open, where actually even if you go to VET and you're fairly advanced, you can revert to general education. I think that is quite important to give flexibility, because Generation Z exists, and indeed young people are demanding, they are very flexible, but they are also very volatile in their choices. And I think to a large extent we have to adapt our systems to this new generation. We have no choice actually, yeah? So we just have to adapt. Now, can I maybe ask Monica and Margherita if you have maybe additional comments on this issue of attractiveness, if you want to add a point?
No. Just to say something, coming back to our kids. My kids, she's in general education. She goes to the university next year. She's a brilliant student, and she's always telling me that what their friends that are from vocational training centers are doing, and they are doing so much more interesting things than she is doing. Believe me, my friends, I believe in training. I'm very proud that we are doing marvelous things in our small Europe, but it's very complex. We have 28, 27 countries. We are doing a lot of things together. And this is the magical thing that we are doing really here. And we are trying to spread the message from some think tankers, policymakers at European level, to our member states, to our VET providers, private and public. And I think we are doing marvelous things. And look around this exhibition, we have very good practice, even sometimes at national level, the indicators are not showing that, but this is for different reasons. So, but Europe, it's not the world. And when we are vet providers, when we are European policymakers, when we are US policymakers, when we are Canadian policymakers, it's important to have this global vision. And it's important to make sure that we and human resources managers are speaking the same language. So this kind of ESCO tool, it's a marvelous thing. But who knows this tool at the SME level, or the human resources, which are the clients itself of this tool? So we do to bomb and to create a marketing campaign to spread the message to our clients. So this is the message, something about attractiveness, and I think it's very important to think in global, again, international qualifications and international certifications.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to stop here. As you know, this is just the first part. Tomorrow we will have a second session shared by Cesare Onestini, and then a third session shared by James Galliera. So this is just the first part. And it's not like in the movies, the sequels are going to be even better than the first ones. And I just want maybe to flag 2 or 3 issues. I have no pretension to try to cover all the ground, but I think there was something about this idea of linking national qualifications, international qualifications and certification. I think, Peter, you said it's a dream. Fine, but reality, as we all know, always starts by a dream. So I think that's an idea that we need to pursue. I also noted a lot of interest for exchange programs. So in Europe, we have this Erasmus concept, and I think we have to see whether this kind of concept can be extended on a more international basis. I think the issue of transversal skills is something which has come up very strongly in our discussion, and this is something, again, on which we would like to come back in these discussions, but also in Europe we have to. And I think these are the 3 issues I would mention really as the most important. A lot has been said about migration, but a lot has been said also about aging population and the need to have the skills to fill the jobs which exist on the market. So it's a question of, it's not a question of surplus, it's a question of adapting labor supply and demand. Thank you all very much. It's been a very interesting session for me, and I'd like to stop here.